Welcome back, everyone, to a Film Odyssey podcast, where I talk about movies, TV, and everything in between. I know I said that this episode would be the Pixar draft, but I'm actually going to put that off a little longer. This is just going to be a solo episode today. And I thought this would be a good time to do an episode on TV, because that's also what this podcast is about. I love TV, and I think I've seen quite a few shows, and quite a few shows that not a lot of people have seen. So I'm going to recommend some of my favorite TV shows in this episode. I'll try to stay away from super popular ones because there's not much more to be said about those. I'm sure most of you have already seen them anyway. But I mean, I guess I'll just mention them really quickly. Some of my favorite shows of all time are pretty popular, like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and The Office, Community, Arrested Development, Parks and Rec, Game of Thrones, minus season 8. So there's a lot of popular shows that I think are great, but I'm going to try to stick with some more hidden gems, or at least people these days don't watch them as much, but maybe they were popular in a different era. But before we get into the meat of the episode, like always, I'm going to go through my watches this week. And I have quite a few actually that were either rewatches that I really enjoyed or some new stuff that I really enjoyed. There's a lot of great stuff this week. The first thing I watched is a new watch, Christopher Nolan's Insomnia. And this is one of the two movies I had left in his filmography leading up to the Odyssey. I'm trying to rewatch slash watch all of his previous movies. And this is one of the only ones that I had left. And it's really, really good. It's probably my least favorite of his besides his debut following, but it's still a great movie. I mean, he never really misses. I love the cast in this. Al Pacino is incredible. So is Robin Williams, Hilary Swank. It's a great cast. And I just really love the vibes. It's set in Alaska, and it's set during a season where it's never dark. And so I like how that plays into Al Pacino's characters, insomnia and paranoia. And Robin Williams' character is very interesting because he plays kind of the villain in this, and I feel like he rarely does that, but he did a really good job. Then I rewatched Witness, and this is starring Harrison Ford. This is one of the most underrated movies of all time. I think this is so excellent. I loved it even more on this rewatch. I think every time I watch it, I'll just be higher and higher on it because it's just expertly made. The direction by Peter Weir is incredible. The cinematography is stunning. The score is beautiful. But really, it's the performances and the romance at the heart of the film that really sells it. I think Harrison Ford has probably never been better. This is his sole Oscar nomination, and although he definitely should have been nominated more, this is definitely a deserved nomination. But his chemistry with Kelly McGillis in this movie is so incredible. Lucas Haas is the child, one of the best child performances I've seen. There's certain scenes in this movie that just take my breath away. Namely, the one that I think of the most is a scene between Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis in a barn. If you know, you know. It's magical. Then I rewatched Casablanca. I'm trying to watch all of the Best Picture winners, and this has gotta be in the top five. I think it might be my favorite out of the ones I've seen. Casablanca, I mean, it's a masterpiece. Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, Claude Rains are all at the top of their game. The screenplay is just maybe the best of all time. It's unbelievable how many iconic lines are in this movie. Great, great stuff. Then I rewatched Soul for my future Pixar episode. I remember loving this the first time, but I'm even higher on it now. I think it's one of the top tier Pixar movies. It just has everything. I love the main character. I love how interesting the screenplay is. It starts out in a way where you think you know where it's going, but where it goes instead is even more interesting, and there's all these twists along the way. The music is beautiful, the message is beautiful. I highly recommend it. I know a lot of people haven't seen it because it came out at the height of COVID, but it's probably one of the best things that came out of COVID, to be honest. Then I did a double feature of classic films I surprisingly haven't seen before, and I watched these with my mom. We're probably going to start doing this every week, watching a new one. But I first watched The Woman in the Window, and this is my first Fritz Lang movie. There's plenty more that I need to see. It's starring Edward G. Robinson and Joan Bennett, who are both incredible. And this is just a very underrated noir. Film noir is one of my favorite genres, and every time I see a new one, it's so great. Like, I don't think I've ever seen one that disappointed me. But this is one that it has a twist at the end that is very polarizing, but I actually really liked it. And I think it reframes the movie in an interesting way where it separates itself from every other film noir I've seen. It's very unique. And then I also watched In a Lonely Place. This has been on my watch list for ages because I love Rebel Without a Cause, so I wanted to see other Nicholas Ray movies that I know a lot of people love, and this is the one that has officially sold me. I just talked about Casablanca. That's probably my favorite Humphrey Bogart movie, but this is maybe my second favorite. It's just so essential and it's so underrated. The screenplay is incredible. Bogart probably gives his best performance of his career. It's either this or Treasure of Sierra Madre. Gloria Graham is also fantastic. She's a very underrated actress from this period. And the ending is unbelievable. It's so depressing, but it's also so tense and so passionate. It's amazing. And then to close out my Pixar watches, I watched Elio for the first time, and I liked it. I definitely really liked the animation and the the blob guy, I forgot his name, but Elio's friend that he makes, who's an alien. I really liked him. But overall, I don't think it really came together as a movie in the way that pretty much all Pixar movies do. So it's not super high on my list, but I still really enjoyed it. And then I went to the theaters with my mom and my sister to see Hoppers, the new Pixar movie that is out, and I heard really good things about it, so I was excited going in. And yeah, it's probably the best thing Pixar has done since I would say Soul, honestly. It's so original, it's so infectious, it's so hilarious, but it's also very dark. And I love the characters, I love the world building. It's a really, really, really good Pixar movie. Highly recommend. And then last night I rewatched Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some, which is just the ultimate hangout movie. I mean, I know the other film he directed, Dazed and Confused, is known as the ultimate hangout movie. I still have to watch that, but this one is just such a vibe. The best vibe ever in a movie that I've seen probably so far. All the characters are so distinct and funny. They have so much personality. This is probably the best thing Glenn Powell has ever done. His character is probably my favorite in it. He's just a riot. But this is just such a it's so interesting because it has absolutely no plot. It's basically the couple days in between these baseball players moving into this kind of like a frat house, but it's just for baseball players, to the first day of school. So it's like that in between period where they're getting settled in and getting to know each other. And it's so fun. And it's just about the vibes, it's about the conversations, It's about the characters, and it's just magical stuff. So those are the things I watched, and now we can get into the meat of the episode, which is my TV recommendations. So before I get into my actual list, I do want to shout out some stuff I'm currently watching. And the first thing being Dexter. I said I wasn't going to talk about popular things. This is very popular, but it's just on my mind, so I figured I would talk about it. I'm having a really good time watching it. I just finished season 7, so I'm on the last season. I'm a little scared because I've heard interesting things about the last season, but at least so far, it's a really, really great show, really consistent. The first 5 seasons, pretty much no misses, besides season 5 having a couple plot lines I wasn't the hugest fan of, but at least those first 4 seasons, pretty much perfect, especially season 4. And I just love all the characters in this show, specifically Michael C. Hall and Jennifer Carpenter as Dexter and Deborah are just powerhouses. The way Michael C. Hall just disappears into that character is pretty remarkable. And Jennifer Carpenter, at least in the later seasons especially, has been really, really, really incredible. This is an entertaining show more than anything else. It reminds me a lot of Breaking Bad, but it's definitely not as deep as Breaking Bad, and the writing isn't quite up there, but it's still weirdly a comfort show, and I've really had fun watching it this first time. Another show, I guess I finished technically, but there's still more to it, is Twin Peaks. I watched the first 2 seasons, which was the original run, but there's The Return, which is basically season 3 that came out decades later. I'm fixing to watch The Return, so I can't speak on that. But as far as the original show, it's already become one of my favorite shows of all time, just on this first watch. And Agent Cooper is probably my new favorite TV character ever. Kyle MacLachlan is just unbelievable in that role. If you want a new TV crush, look no further. But the vibes and the story are just so incredible in this show. It's created by David Lynch, and I've had such a fun time diving into his work. I still have a lot to go, but the stuff I've seen have all been masterpieces, and this is no exception. The way that the town of Twin Peaks is developed so much that it feels like its own character, and all of the characters in it are so distinct and memorable. It's actually overwhelming when you start thinking about all of the great characters in the show. And the central mystery is so fascinating. They kind of answer it, but they also kind of don't answer it. I'm curious how it's going to be explored further in The Return. But even if The Return didn't exist, this would still be an all timer. And I also watched the movie that came out a few years later, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And I think the movie is perhaps superior to the show. I was blown away. It's not a fun watch. You have to be in the mood for it. It's quite depressing, but very, very rewarding. So now I'll go into the list proper, and I'll start out with a show that was very popular in the late 2000s, early 2010s, but it was mainly popular with critics, and I feel like it still hasn't garnered the fan base that it deserves, and that's Mad Men. This is one of those prestige AMC shows that came out back in the day, along with Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead, but this show has perhaps the best writing out of any show ever. I think the only thing that might rival it is Better Call Saul, but this show is just remarkable. And it's one that every time I rewatch, I feel like I'm not quite getting everything out of it that I want to because it's so complex. All of the characters are so complicated and flawed, and the way that 1960s America is explored so thoroughly is very, it's quite outstanding. I can't imagine everything that went into the show because from the production design to the dialogue to the costumes to the music, it's just all so authentic, so of its time, but also the show feels modern at the same time, like it's supposed to, I think. And there's certain episodes in the show that are truly transcendent and just so weird. Like there's an episode called The Crash, and it's basically an hour long fever dream, and I love it. And then, of course, there's the iconic episodes like The Suitcase. But really, from start to finish, this is one of the most consistently great shows. There's not one even remotely weak season. And even though there's some questionable mini plot lines and questionable character arcs every now and then, it's never to the point where I'm taken out of the show. It's just a little weird. But then when I rewatch the show, every time I rewatch it, I appreciate those aspects more and more. So I feel like even the parts that you may not cling on to the most, it's still really good writing because it reveals itself in an interesting way each time you revisit it. So I could go on and on about Mad Men. Definitely check it out. It's very, I wouldn't say it's an easy watch at all. I think you definitely have to put on your thinking cap for it, but it's so rewarding if you give it a chance. And I guess I'll tie in my next pick with that because I feel similar about it. It's a new show from Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan, the man, the myth, the legend. And he's done it again with his new show on Apple TV, Pluribus, also starring Rhea Seehorn, who is just one of my favorite actresses. I think she's the best part of Better Call Saul, even more so than Saul. And she's also the best part of the show. This is another one that's quite challenging, but I don't think it's that inaccessible. I feel like people just expected it to be one thing and then they were disappointed when it turned out to be, in my opinion, more interesting. It's a very slow, meandering show, but that's not a bad thing at all because the writing is incredible and the way that it develops its characters without hardly any dialogue is just, I don't think I've seen it done better in any other show. In the way that it's done, it has this very unique tone that's very off-putting but also weirdly comforting in moments. It really keeps you guessing and it keeps tugging at your feelings in different directions, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Season 1 ends with kind of a insane cliffhanger. So, and I know I'm gonna have to wait probably 2+ years for the next season, but look, it's worth it. The next show I want to shout out is maybe what inspired this entire episode to begin with, because I think this is bar none the most underrated show of all time. Because I feel like it could be, like, depending on what day you ask me, it could be the best show of all time. And it is so underrated. Even when it was running, like hardly anybody knew it existed. And it was on HBO. So I don't understand it. But this is a masterpiece through and through. It's The Leftovers. And I'll talk about another show by this creator in a minute, but Damon Lindelof created this apocalyptic, emotionally decimating masterpiece. Basically, the premise is that it takes place a year after what's called the departure, in which I want to say like 10% of the world's population just vanished into thin air, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. It was just random people. And it follows mainly a family and their journey through making sense of all this. But it's also quite expansive, especially in the later seasons. And you get to see how it's affecting people all across the world. And it's just fascinating how different people's perspective and experiences factor into their interactions and relationships with other people, their outlook and assumptions on life, and everything in between. It's just Absolutely fascinating. And it's so short as well. It's only 3 seasons, 28 episodes. It feels a lot longer than it is, though, because every episode is just so emotionally draining. And I know that sounds like a turnoff, but I think it's essential viewing for everybody. You need to watch it at least once. I get that if it's maybe a little too emotionally draining for you to ever revisit it, but personally, I've seen it probably 4 times at this point, and I will continue to watch it for the rest of my life because I don't know, it just scratches this itch for me that no other show has done. It's just so hard to explain, but it's weirdly optimistic, especially after season one. Season one has gotten a lot of criticism. Well, not a lot, but compared to the other seasons, it's looked at as inferior. And while it is my least favorite season, it's still a masterpiece because the whole show is a masterpiece. But the first season is a lot bleaker than the last two. I think season two kind of starts fresh in a way, and it's kind of this breath of fresh air. It's still a depressing show, but it's weirdly hopeful. But this is one of the most creative shows I've ever seen. It's very much rooted in reality, but at the same time, there's these supernatural elements, obviously, because of what's basically like an apocalyptic event that's unexplainable. That's the core of the film, but it's not really about the event per se, but it's about the aftermath of the event. Like how does the earth and the people on it move forward after such a devastating and unexplainable event? Justin Theroux and Carrie Coon specifically, but the whole cast, but them specifically, they give two of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. Carrie Coon, especially, is just unbelievable. I can't even wrap my brain around the fact that she did what she did in this show and didn't get hardly any recognition. Like, no awards, anything like that. It was just, it really makes my blood boil. But it'll be worth it if more people watch this show. So please, if you take anything from this episode, watch The Leftovers. And even if it's not completely your vibe, you'll definitely get something out of it because it's so emotionally rich and resonant. Okay, I'm done talking about The Leftovers. Now I'm going to move on to the other Damon Lindelof show. This one's a lot more popular, but I feel like it was a lot more popular when it came out, and now it's a little bit controversial, which I don't think is justified. And it's also just not really talked about in the same way that other shows are. And so that would be Lost. You might have heard of this show, but you probably haven't seen it. This is my favorite show to watch. It's the most enjoyable watching experience. And so I rewatch this show all the time. I'm actually in the middle of a rewatch right now, and it definitely wasn't but like 6 months ago that I finished my previous watch. So yeah, I'm just always watching this show basically. But it's so good. This is another one like The Leftovers with a lot of supernatural elements, but it's a completely different vibe. It's the perfect marriage of prestige TV with kind of the joy you get out of watching reality TV or like Netflix shows. It's kind of in the sweet spot where it's very intellectually rich and there's a lot of thematic things to dig deep into. There's a lot of lore. Like you could really get obsessed about the show. Trust me, I know. And try to figure out every little thing about it, all the mysteries and everything. But it's also a show that you can easily just watch and not turn your brain off, but not have to put your critic glasses on and just enjoy. The characters are so lovable and interesting and deep, and the way the story unravels is so fascinating. It always ends on this cliffhanger. Every episode basically ends with a cliffhanger or a reveal, and throughout the whole show, it basically keeps up that momentum. The last season, it's not quite as, it's a little more hit or miss, but even the last season is still great. I don't know how it does it. It's a very long show, and somehow it keeps your interest the entire time. because it keeps evolving. Like, for instance, season four changes things up dramatically. It just comes out of nowhere and it feels like a breath of fresh air. Season four feels like a basically a different show, and then season five feels like an entirely different show from season four. So it's just constantly evolving, but it all somehow ties together and feels cohesive. And the finale, don't even get me started on the finale because it's the most misunderstood finale of all time. I think when it came out, it was more polarizing than it is now. I think now people are coming to their senses, but for some reason it was just super misunderstood and really to a infuriating degree because it was so obvious that people were wrong about it, but for some reason it stuck and it's known as one of the most polarizing finales in history. But even besides the finale, the whole rest of the show is incredible. And there's episodes like The Constant that are just all timers. I remember the first time I watched The Constant, I was literally sobbing, like tears running down my face. I didn't know, and it's so weird because I didn't really know why it was happening because it's not like it was a super sad thing. It was just like such an overwhelming emotion that that's the only release kind of thing. I also think this show has the best ensemble cast of all time. There's literally like 40 characters in this show that have considerable amount of screen time, and pretty much all of them are excellent and are super well acted and super well written. Like, I can't even pick my favorite character because they're just all so good. So, while there might not be one standout character like a lot of other shows, I think the ensemble cast is so strong that I think it's way better than just having one standout character that you root for. And even the villains are so, like, I found myself rooting for some of the villains because they're so weirdly likable, even though they're doing really evil stuff all the time. And other than the characters and everything, I also just love the themes of the show and the lore and how there's all these mysteries and there's these really big mysteries that kind of carry on throughout the whole show, and then there's smaller mysteries that get resolved quicker. And the structure is so cool because it's like half in the present, half in the past for a lot of the show, and then they even changed the structure later down the line, but it's just so engaging because the stuff in the present is so interesting, but then you really want to watch the flashbacks as well to get information and more content with the characters. And then finally, I want to mention the music in this show because I think it's the best music in any TV show pretty easily. Well, okay. I thought it was definitely the best until I watched Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks has incredible music, but I do still think Lost is better just because of the breadth of music. It's there's so many different themes for every little thing and they're all so memorable and it's so gorgeously composed. Michael Giacchino does the score, and he's done some of my favorite scores ever. Mainly for Pixar, he did The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Up, Inside Out, stuff like that, and they're all incredible, but I think Lost just takes it to another level, and it's weirdly underrated. I listen to that score all the time. It's probably the only score I listen to consistently outside of the movie or show that it's in. And yeah, I could go on and on and on and on, just like with the other shows, but this will always be a top five show for me and a top one comfort watch because I just always find myself coming back to it. Even though I basically know everything backwards and forwards, it's still just as enjoyable to watch on a 10th watch than it was on the first watch. I think this is a good transition into my next pick because this is a show that has a lot of the same actors that are in Lost, but it's a completely different show. This is Person of Interest, and I would say this is, along with The Leftovers, my pick for the most underrated show, just because this is another 10 out of 10 masterpiece that I think is it ages better than any show in history because it talked about AI and engaged with those themes before it was really super relevant. And I think the way it explores artificial intelligence is so mature and so nuanced. and so ahead of its time. It's unbelievable that this came out in the early 2010s, but it's so prescient. And this is a show that I'm currently rewatching right now. It's another one that I rewatch a lot just because, again, the characters are really strong. But the most attractive thing about this show is, like I said, the way it tackles its themes. There's some conversations in this show between characters that are so incredibly riveting. Like, this show at times has the best dialogue out there. Like, it's so good. Season 1 starts out a little bit like case of the week kind of thing, where there's a lot of what you might call filler, not a lot of plot progression, but it's still really great. And I think when you rewatch it, once you watch the whole show, you'll appreciate it even more. But once you get to season 2, season 3, it takes off and it never stops. Once the plot really kicks in, this show becomes one of the most entertaining and intellectually satisfying shows you'll ever watch. And this is another one that just sickens me because it's so underrated. Like, this is also in my top 5 shows of all time. I think this is maybe even better than Lost. I used to think Lost was better, but although, like I said, Lost is more enjoyable to watch, this one I think is objectively the better show. The acting is also next level. Michael Emerson, Amy Acker, Taraji P. Henson in probably her best role. Just incredible acting. And it's also campy as well. Like Jim Caviezel's performance is really unserious, even during pretty serious moments. But I think it really works, and it really is in line with his character. So even when this show seems cheesy, it's actually not, and it's doing it intentionally. And I love shows like that. It kind of reminds me of Twin Peaks, because Twin Peaks is so campy. It's so outlandish. Person of Interest is not quite to that level, but I see little elements of it in there because the show can go from kind of a buddy comedy to absolutely devastating within pretty much the same episode sometimes. But yeah, I highly, highly recommend Person of Interest if you haven't seen it. Next up is a completely different show than the rest I've talked about. This is a musical comedy show, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and this is basically a one-woman show by Rachel Bloom. She acts in it, she writes the music, she writes the scripts, she basically does everything. And what a talent. This is one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. And a lot of it is just due to the music, the songs in this show. There's multiple songs in every episode, and they're all so funny. The plot is ridiculous. It's just this woman who moves to California and is constantly doing these insane things. And it's just so fun watching her navigate relationships and friendships and everything. And there's some really sweet, touching moments as well. I can't wait to rewatch this. I've only seen it once with Sarah Beth, but it's just such a good time. And then finally, I'm going with another show I've only watched once. I'm excited to revisit. I watched this one with my sister Bria. It's her favorite show of all time, and it's The Owl House, which is an animated show, the only animated show on my list. I just haven't seen that many. But this show is pretty short. The episodes are really short, and there's only 2/3 seasons. The third season's really short, but it really packs a punch. The world building and the animation in this show is absolutely inspired, and all the characters are so lovable. I instantly fell in love with half of these characters. I still think about them. I also love the representation in this show, the cultural representation, the queer representation. It's all really interesting coming from Disney because Disney never has the best representation. And sadly, the show was canceled, but I'm just so glad it exists in the first place because it kind of feels like it shouldn't exist, like it's too good. But yeah, I highly recommend The Owl House. I think it's kind of similar to other shows like Gravity Falls. It's like in that universe almost, but from what I've heard, this one stands out even amongst those other ones. So definitely give it a shot, especially if you're a fan of those other Disney shows. So I think that's all of the major shows I wanted to talk about. Of course, there's others that I really love, but I just wanted to condense it to a list of ones that I really want people to see. So hopefully those gave you some recommendations that maybe you haven't seen before. Yeah, I've been talking a lot about movies on this podcast so far, so I thought it was time for a little TV. I'm probably going to do either individual episodes on shows that come out this year or like a recap of a lot of different shows. The only show I've seen this year so far is A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which I really loved, but I started this podcast like after the buzz around that kind of died down, so I'm probably not going to do a whole episode on it, but I'll definitely talk about it at some point when I talk about the shows of this year. And then also The Pit is still releasing, but I'm definitely going to talk about it once it's fully out. So although most of this podcast will focus on movies, I'll definitely talk about shows as well. I also want to do a TV characters tier list or a draft of some kind because I really want to talk about some of my favorite characters. And I know some of my friends and family want to talk about it as well. So that'll be a fun one. I'll try to do that pretty soon. But I'm pretty sure the very next episode will be on the drama. And I'm bringing on a guest to talk about that with me. And then from there, we'll see. But that's all for me this time. See you in the next one. Bye.